Figure It Out Part 2 is all about color and value. So now you've got your composition, which is made up of a figure and ground. And your figure is made by strategically grouping two or more positive shapes. So you can see my three men are overlapping, so they're all touching. But it's not only about that, it's about how they're placed within the format. So I've taped this down to a board, which I recommend you do as well. The untaped version might look something like this, where the format is drawn as a box. And then when I taped my good copy down, I put my tape right along the box. So basically the tape is now making the format. And where my positive shapes touch the format, how they're situated inside the composition, also is significant because, as you know, that creates the negative shape, or we call it the ground. And so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I think, pieces of negative shape. So you should have something similar. You've got your positive shape, negative shape, but your positive shapes are grouped to make a figure. Remember when you did the bird drawing where you had to use various values to shade in the shapes that made up the bird drawing, and your goal was to, a couple things, differentiate one shape from another by using value contrast, and in doing so the second goal was to eliminate the need for outlines. Well, this is a similar process. This step involves a similar process rather. Here's my example. So I've started doing exactly that. I've started differentiating the various shapes that make up my drawing with different values, using the system where no two adjacent shapes have the same value. So the section of the arm here where I'm pointing has a different value than this piece of the arm. I'll zoom in so you can see. So two different values, but in the same color. This color is gray because it was graphite. By the way, hopefully your drawing is broken up into shapes, and that was the whole point of doing the contour bird drawing before you started this Figure It Out Part 1, was so that you could understand how you could actually use line to investigate changes in value. So for instance, this man's arm is all the same shape, or like it's all the same object, but because of how his arm is bent, this portion is going to have a different value than this portion. So what we want to do now is use the knowledge that you gained by doing this assignment. Remember this one? Where you were creating various values of one color with colored pencil. But then there was another aspect to this study. It was understanding how you could paint with colored pencil, where you're layering colors much like a painter would layer paint. And so in my middle spectrum here I've got peacock blue over top of sienna brown, and in my bottom example I actually have 3 layers of color which are labeled here. So you've completed this, so you have a good understanding of that. Your goal is to apply this approach to painting with colored pencil to Figure It Out Part 2. So you're going to add color to your composition, to your drawing, but you're going to do so in such a way that you're extremely mindful of value contrast, so that when you're finished adding your color, you shouldn't really see any outlines. Before you get started, choose a color scheme, which basically means that you're going to use a set of colors and repeat them throughout the entire composition. And what that will do is it will build a strong sense of connectedness and wholeness in your composition, we refer to that as unity. So that's something that all artists strive for, is to achieve a strong sense of unity in their artwork. I'm going to work a little bit on this just to kind of give you an example of what I mean. So maybe I'll start with this portion of my drawing, my composition, and I know I want this man's suit to be blue, so I'm going to start with brown because that is going to function as my undercolor. But I'm also thinking about value, so I think I want this piece. I'm going to do the opposite of what I had done in my value, or my graphite version. I want this piece, this shape rather, to be darker. So knowing that, darker than this piece, sorry. So knowing that, I'm already going to press a little bit harder on the bottom portion of this man's arm, and I'm going to move up into this top portion, and I'm going to ease off on the pressure that I put on the colored pencil, thereby creating a lighter value. So remember, that's my undercolor. I'll zoom in a little bit. And now I'm going to go on top of that with this blue. It's kind of a blue violet actually. Remember, I'm holding the colored pencils strategically so that I can use the side of the lead, as I call it, even though there's no lead in there. You know what I mean. And it's important to keep your colored pencils sharp. So I'm going to move up into this top section now. The value differentiation will really come in, really take notice, or be noticeable rather, once I start saturating the paper with pigment, and once I start using darker colored pencils. So I think in general I'm going to have this man's suit pretty dark. It's going to be like maybe like a navy suit, and so I don't mind pressing a little bit harder now. But remember, I said I want this bottom shape darker, so I'm going to switch to an indigo now, which is like a dark blue. And I'll use it to darken this bottom piece, this bottom shape. So once again, I used contour lines, or like sort of a contour drawing approach, to break my positive shapes, three men, into like sub-shapes. And that was just so I can create visual complexity by creating different values in those shapes. I still want this blue to be a little bit darker, so I'll use the color that darkens all other colors, black. And then back on top with my original blue violet, so that this piece of the suit can really match that top piece. So how about the shape that's behind this shape? Well, maybe I'll use a different color there. Maybe I'll use a gray. And that works well because not only is it a different color, but of course it's a different value. So I'm kind of counting on that. So you shouldn't have any trouble differentiating all the various shapes of your composition, because not only are you going to use different values, but you also use most likely different colors, and so that'll help. I want you to always, though, strive to create visual complexity by layering your colors and making them rich and unique, like you did with this study assignment. And so in this gray, what could I layer in there? Well, I actually have, maybe just this other brown. Just a little bit though, not too much. So you might even want to experiment on some scrap paper when you're deciding on what colors to layer in order to create some really interesting hues. Okay, and then in the piece of negative shape, because so far I've only been working on the positive shape, but I think I want to use this really, it's called beige, so it's super light. I'm going to use this beige in the negative shape right over here. For now, I might put something else on top of there, but I just like that it goes well with my color scheme, but it's a really light value. Okay. And then if I keep working on this man's suit, which is the positive shape, perhaps I want to stick with gray, but I want to make sure that I'm thinking about value. So actually, one of the things I know for sure is that I want this man's hair quite dark. So maybe what I'll do is I'll lay down some violet in there, and then I'll put some black on top. So sometimes it's okay to establish your really dark values early on in your coloring process. And that can help you strategically distribute them throughout the composition so that they are balanced, meaning you don't have all your dark values in one part of the composition. They're kind of distributed in such a way that you have a sense of equilibrium throughout the composition. I like this beige. I'm gonna put some down in this guy's face, or like the back of his head. Okay, and then the black on the hair. So I'm going to work on this for a little bit and then come back with some commentary. If you make a choice with a color or a value and you suddenly change your mind, colored pencil can actually be erased. You'll never get the paper to the pure whiteness that it was initially, but you can probably lighten it up substantially. So I realize now I want this little pocket shape to be much lighter. So I'm working back on top with an eraser. I'm trying to be mindful of the placement of my dominant dark values so that I create a sense of equilibrium, an effective distribution of visual interest throughout the composition. That's the principle of design known as balance. So it doesn't mean equally distributing the dark values around the composition. We don't want things to be too equal. It just involves the careful placement of them so that the composition has a sense of balance and equilibrium. So I've worked on this piece for a while now, and I keep using the strategy of ensuring that no two adjacent shapes have the same value. So this shape and this shape have two different values. And of course it helps that I can switch colors. For instance, if we move to the top, like maybe this shape this is a piece of negative shape, and this piece of positive shape are close in value, but at least because they're two different colors, I'm able to differentiate one shape from another. As I was working on this piece, I noticed that there were a few places where the same shape overlapped itself. So like right here, here's the non-colorized version. So I thought, well, actually right here where this arm is being overlapped by the jacket, perhaps I should have another shape in here so that I can differentiate this edge by using a different value here. Because just like with that bird assignment, I want you to try to eliminate the need for outlines. And so you can see what I did here is I just created a new shape and then made it a much darker value than the jacket that's in the foreground. Now, along the same lines, what I want you to focus on when you're working on yours is if you get to any places where you can still see quite a bit of pencil outline. Let's see if I can find a spot here. Maybe like up in here, I still see quite a bit of pencil outline. Or actually, here's a better spot. Sorry. How about right there? Like these two colors are so similar, and so are the values. So very similar. So what I could do there is just take something dark, like I've got this indigo, and if I just add a little, I start on the line, and then I pull outwards to make a darker value. Maybe even along this guy's face here I can still kind of see the pencil. So I'm just going to darken that shape a little bit. In the end, you might still notice a little bit of pencil outlines, but do your best to really try to exaggerate the value contrast so that the pencil outlines are no longer necessary and no longer visible. Now maybe what I'll do is go over top of that with some gray, because I think this is supposed to be part of the gray suit. Okay, so and then maybe let's just tweak that down in here. Now, let me move the camera so you can see what I'm doing. So basically it's like where one shape is overlapping another. Just be really mindful with whether or not there's still a line that's obvious, and if there is, see if you can just tweak it a little bit. A really good example of mine is here. Let's see how much I can zoom in. So like under this man's palm and his wrist, I just put a little shadow in there because I felt that I could still see a little bit too much of the pencil. And another great place, another good example is here under the collar. So even though in the initial drawing there's no shadow shape right there, what I did is see that? I actually added a little shadow shape so that I kind of disguised the the bottom edge of that collar, like the bottom pencil edge, I mean, because I could still, I could still see the pencil edge. So I've disguised it. Okay, so, I mean, if this was paint, if paint was the medium we'd be using, it would be more opaque and we'd be able to disguise those pencil lines even better from the initial drawing, but do your best with the colored pencil, just always keeping in mind to create value contrast. So yes, color contrast is important and that'll help you differentiate shape, but the main strategy is the value contrast, which is almost the same thing, because remember that value is a property of color. So you can't use color and not be mindful of value. But the point is that you're going to have to vary your pressure that you put on the pencil crayons, and also use black to darken your values so that you can differentiate those shapes. The last thing I want to say about value is look at how I was careful to effectively distribute my dark values. So like this man's hair is dark, the two ties are quite dark, I have some dark values down here at the bottom. So I feel like there's a good sense of equilibrium around the composition where my dark values are strategically distributed. And just a note about some of the other colors that I used. You can see that I've added just one piece of this blue-green up in the top left corner and a little bit of like a yellow-orange here at the center, but yet I didn't add those colors anywhere else in the composition. We have to be careful not to make our artwork too balanced, and so we want to promote asymmetric balance. So sometimes having just like one shape or one patch of color as an isolated piece of color is a great way to kind of shake up the balance and add some nice variety. As you're coming down the home stretch, just on that note about outlines, what you can do is if there's still some outlines that are seeming like, you know, they make the art, they give the artwork maybe an unfinished look, then what you can do is you can actually purposefully darken that line with one of your colored pencils. So that's what I've done there. And you can also move, just again add another shape. So I had a line here that was still visible, so I just added another shadow shape. So I basically colored along the line to disguise the line. So that was right here. So I made a shadow shape along the line, so that line is no longer visible because it's being covered up by the shadow shape. And then maybe over here, for the sake of balance, I'll just darken this contour a little bit with my colored pencil so that it doesn't look like it has just a pencil line. And even better if you can do some varied line weight, where you press harder on parts of the line or make parts of the line wider than other parts of the line. That can add a lot of dimension to your drawing. Okay, so a couple things you can do to add a few finishing touches. Another good example of that in my composition is up top on that man's head. So let me zoom into that. You'll see what I mean. So yeah, right here. So like this is the edge of this man's collar, but there's still a really strong pencil line being shown there. Probably doesn't help that I don't have a color on that paper for the man's skin. So maybe what I'll do is, okay, I'll just go in there with this beige color and add some color on his skin, but I want to maintain the light value, so I'm going to press, I'm not going to press too hard. And then I'm going to, again, just make a shadow along this pencil line, but that's not the appropriate color. I'm going to have to, I think, grab this navy. So see, so it's like I'm creating a tiny little shadow right up against the pencil line to disguise the pencil line. I'm going to run a little bit of brown on top of that blue there. So now it's like I don't really see the pencil outline anymore, I just see this shadow. And I like that appearance a little bit better. Okay, so do what you can to disguise outlines. Here's another one right in there. And that's under the collar. So there'd be a shadow there anyway. See, and I'm just, while I'm at it, since I'm here, I'm just gonna darken this little area under the collar. Okay. maybe I'll work a little bit on this guy's, so like we can see this pencil line along his collar. So how about I just form a shadow there instead. Blending blue, dark blue like navy, and dark brown is a great way to create like a shadow color, almost like a natural gray, which shadows kind of are, right? Push it up into... This guy's head is supposed to be the focal point, so it pays to try to develop a little bit more visual complexity there. But really what I'm trying to do is disguise that pencil line. A little shadow there. Kind of suggests that his face is turned away from the light. So all these little finishing touches add some nice visual complexity. Sorry, I moved over. Better zoom out. I moved over to work on the hand here. Tiny little shadow being cast. So they're again just disguising a pencil line. So I just color on the line and then push outwards into the shape basically. And then finally on this man's lapel, I still see a little bit of the pencil, so I may as well just pretend that it's like a shadow, but I'm going to widen parts of it carefully by varying the pressure that I put on my colored pencil. So I guess what I'm saying is if my viewers can see a line, I'd rather it look like it was a line that was strategically put there. But I don't want to encourage you to outline everything. So I want to stress that you should not be outlining all of your drawing, because you're actually going to be assessed on that, on whether or not you can differentiate shape with value contrast instead of relying on outlines. But what I'm saying here is that because we're using colored pencil, it's pretty challenging to disguise all of the original pencil outlining, the drawing that is. And so what we have to do instead is just be really strategic as artists and creative with where we purposely add line with the colored pencil as a design feature. Because line is one of the elements of art. And so it's not that it's wrong to use, it's just that we want to be really creative with how we use it. Okay. A reminder that when looking at your finished product, there should be evidence that you've layered colors all over the artwork. So there really shouldn't be any shapes where there's only one color. Even light value shapes could have two colors laid on into the shape. You just have to be mindful of how hard you're pressing. So that was the concept, once again, that we explored with this study. Approaching the use of colored pencils like a painter would. Layer colors to create rich and complex hues. So ensure that you've done that throughout your artwork. So that's Figure It Out Part 2. Have fun painting with colored pencil. And reach out to me if you would like some feedback or some guidance. Take care.